ever notice how cute some of the designs are on Selvages these days? Do you hate just throwing them away? I know I do. Hi, I'm Angelique, and today I'm going to show you how to take all these selvages that you can save over the year and turn them into a beautiful remembrance quilt wall hanging. Selvage is the part of the fabric that they add to the edges in order to keep it from unraveling. So you know, with like cotton, when you cut into it, we'll get little strings that come off of that because it's woven. So they do this on the edges in the manufacturing process so that it stays together. Otherwise, we would just get terrible fabric. You'll notice that selvages will have little holes in them sometimes because that's how the machine kind of grabs onto it to roll and create all the things as they're doing the weaves and all of that. Selvage will often have information about the designer, like this is Ruby Star, what it's made out of, where it's made. There's on this one even their website addresses there. Some selvages will also include the dye lots that were used to make the print, and the numbers here tell you the order that they actually did the dyes. So there's a lot of really interesting information that's in selvages. So I'm going to show you how to turn your selvages into fabric. So one of the things that you're going to need in order to turn your selvages into a fabric that we can cut from is some SF101 that is 100% cotton backing. That's really important because we are going to be doing some serious ironing, high heat, with steam, all of that. So you want to cut a minimum of 45 inches. Once you get what we're going to become the backing of our fabric, our SF101, you want to make sure that the rough part, which is the part that's the dried glue, is up. So one side will be softer, that's the fabric side, and then you have the glue side. So you want to make sure you have it the right way, or when you go to iron, you're going to mess up your iron because you're going to get glue all over your iron. The next thing that you want to do is select your selvages. And so you're going to lay your selvages out. I like to put the fuzzy part, that little part that's a little frayed. I like to usually put those all the same direction down, and you're going to start to fill up your SF101. I actually have one started for you because this does take some time, but it's really fun to do. It's very relaxing because it's kind of like making a collage. Now, one of the things that I recommend when you are saving your selvages is that I saved most of these over a year. I did have a little bit of help. I had some friends here provide me with some as I was getting ready to do this project, but for the most part, most of these are from quilts that I made over the last year. When you're saving your selvages, you'll notice that a lot of the times I like to cut off a little bit of the actual fabric, like this one here, so I can see not only the selvage, but just a little bit of that fabric for me to remember what it is, to really kind of create that remembrance. And that's been a lot of fun for me because I've been like, oh, I remember when I used this. I used this in the quilt that I gave my BFF. And it's really kind of a fun memory lane of what you've done over the year. Even though this is a glued background, what I did first is I used a glue stick to kind of add these on because one, when I use my iron, it's really hard for me to just stay right on that little part, so I'm always going to end up over, and then I'm getting some of that glue on my iron. So I really wanted to cover all this up first before I ironed it for the real adherence. And two, what if I decide I don't like where that thing was and I want to change it up? So the glue stick allows me the flexibility to go, I don't really like this one here, and change it. I simply put a little dot of that glue, and every few inches, like 5-6 inches, I put another dot and try to put that down, and I have it really lined up against my previous piece. And like I said, this is just to get it temporarily adhered and in the place that I want it. Some of my selvages are really long, and so they're going to be longer than my fabric. And so I really recommend cutting as you go, so that, because this is a temporary hold and it does take a few minutes to dry where it's a little bit more sticky and stayed down. If you catch this part that's kind of hanging over on something, you can end up pulling the whole thing off. So definitely cut as you go and throw this back in your pile. So I have the first one on. If they got a little wrinkly, just give them a little bit of a press and then decide where you want to start the next one. But I do like to alternate where I'm starting so that I get a really scrappy look to the quilt. So like here you can see this doesn't perfectly line up, but that's okay because I can find one that's a little bit more narrow, or I can add one and make it a little more crooked, and it's still gonna look great. So I'm finishing up my last row. So you can see I tried to change colors here and there, different shapes. You are going to need to make at least 3 of these. I made 4. That gave me plenty of fabric to make choices when I laid out my quilt. But you'll need a total of 100 blocks if you want to make the 10 by 10 that I did. We're going to cut each one of these to be 5-inch blocks once we get this all finished. You could get about 36 blocks out of each one if your salvages line up to the very edge here. You can see this one's going to be a little bit short, so it's nice to have the extra, and like I said, it'll just give you some flexibility when you're laying out your pattern. All right, so we're at our pressing station, and so now we're gonna press and iron and iron. We wanna be careful for the first one because these are still very loose. They're held on in a couple places, so we just wanna be careful. We are doing this with steam, and we wanna try to not catch the corners of our iron and pull those up. So you may have to kind of adjust a little bit as you're doing this if you knock one out of place, but definitely use some steam here because we are trying to activate the glue that is on the SF-101. And we're gonna do this across the whole piece of fabric that we have created. All right, so I finished pressing the front the first time. Now we're gonna carefully turn it over and press on the back. That's one of the reasons why I highly recommend using that 100% cotton backed SF-101. If you use something that's not 100% cotton, it's not gonna take the heat and it's actually gonna shrink on you, which is then gonna cause distortion in your fabric that you just created. Again, remember steam, lots of steam. And this is going to really help get that glue to activate and stick. All right, so we just finished pressing the back for the first time. Guess what? We're not done. We have to do some more ironing. So now we're gonna flip it back over and we're gonna press again from the top. Anytime I'm working on the top side, I'm always a little bit more careful with using the iron just so I don't disturb anything. So when I say we're gonna press, we are going to press. All right, so we've pressed the top for the second time. We're gonna flip over and press again on the back at least one more time. If you notice that there are still a lot of like airy parts, then you might need to even press more. All right, so I'm gonna take this back. If I did notice some places, I may do some more pressing at the top. And I wish I could tell you even after doing that your pressing is done, but it's not. So while we're cutting from time to time, because of the way that we're cutting, we may cause one to dislodge or one that didn't get pressed as much, so we may still have to come and press a few individual blocks. But I'm gonna take this back over to the cutting board and let it cool a little bit to really give that glue that's on the back of the SF-101 a chance to really adhere, because you know it gets stronger when it's cool. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how to start cutting this up to make your blocks. All right, our selvage fabric has cooled, so we're going to start by just cutting a sliver off to straighten out this edge. And now we're gonna cut 5-inch strips. Now that we have our 5-inch strips, we're gonna cut our strips into 5-inch blocks. If you notice anything coming up in your strips, go ahead and take it back to the iron. Sometimes it doesn't happen until you actually have a block cut. Remember that you need a total of 100 blocks. So for the next step, what I want to do is, you say you have like 3 to 4 of these piles that you've cut. I want to try to randomize them a little bit ahead of time as much as I can. So I'm going to make, since I'm doing a 10 by 10, or in this case I'm going to do a 5 by 10 to get the process started, I'm going to make 5 piles. So I'm going to deal these out like cards. And I'm just going to alternate between my stacks. So if I had 3 stacks, then I would deal from the 3 stacks. I'm also going to need some white fabric, and the white fabric is going to be the cornerstones that I use to make the diamond shapes to really bring this whole thing together. I've pre-cut these larger ones already, but I selected 4 different whites that have some little bit of extra in them that all kind of blend together. So I already cut those ones, so I have them. So I'm just going to cut these. The centers, or what I'm going to call the inner blocks, will take 2 of the cornerstones, and then the border blocks or the outer blocks will take 1 cornerstone. So we will need 3-inch squares. I'm not super worried about the accuracy as long as it's 3 inches on one way. It will be close enough on the other. So to speed this up, I'm just going to line them up and use my long 3 by 18 ruler to finish cutting these into squares. I wanted to control as I was laying things out. If I didn't like where a block ended up, then I could move it or take it out, and I had lots of blocks to choose from. So I'm going to use the design wall. What I did is I started up at the top, and I like to have that first one just, horizontal where I can read the letters. And then I just kind of decided to alternate them so that every other one is vertical. These words are running this way. I decided I wanted them to run this way. I have my sets here, and I set up a couple for you so I can show you this part. Now, if you are not particular about how your blocks end up and you just kind of want to make this fast, then you can do this method. And with this method, you're going to need 19 blocks that are going to have the cornerstone on the bottom right corner. You're going to need 17 blocks that have the cornerstone on the left top corner. When you have, please notice the direction that I have the lines or the stripes that are created with the words facing downwards, like facing me like I was reading them, okay? And then you'll need 64 blocks that have the cornerstones in both corners. But I'm basically going to draw on the wrong side, so this is the right side. On the wrong side of my cornerstone block, I'm going to draw a diagonal line with a erasable pen. And just clip that on so I can get it to my sewing station. Note that for the double piece, where we have them on both sides, we need the lines to face. So I'm going to sew each of these as a scant 1/4 of an inch. Right, now that I have all the cornerstone blocks on, I'm going to go take them back to the cutting station. All right, so now we're going to cut off the excess material, lining up the stitch line, not the drawn line since I did a scant 1/4 of an inch, but the stitch line. Then we're going to take it back over to the iron station and just press our triangles out, just like that. So we finished row 1. As you can see, we're starting to get our diamond shapes with our first half of the triangles that are going to make that up. We're going to continue this process adding the cornerstones, being very careful, especially when we get to these inner rows here, the inner blocks, because we have 2 sides. So I'm gonna go finish at least the first few rows of these, and when we come back later, I'm gonna show you how you put your blocks together, how you put your rows together, and a special way we wanna quilt this one to make sure that we really get our selvages secured for our wall hanging. Thanks for joining me, and see you back in a little bit.